Well, hi everyone. This is Ian, and I thought this would be a good chance to give us a bit of an overview of where are we right now with our annual work plan. It's more specifically how we've made some fundamental changes on how we've looked at putting together this annual work plan. Well, this project really has I should say this work plan has really kind of five things we're focusing on. One is we need to have an accurate picture of where we are and going beyond just what we had to put in the proposals. We need to kind of track how we've set some of our target parameters, and so we can kind of compare when we make changes to our target parameters, how that's gone on. The other one is shifting from graduate to graduation readiness, and then access to external finance. And lastly is resource management of the budget. So we're going to cover several of these topics in this presentation. First of all is we wanted to make sure we had a better sense of where we are. So many of you probably remember this table here. Yeah. So these numbers are going to look pretty familiar, but these are really now some very old numbers. These were numbers that, we had just come up with an anticipation, but since that time, we've actually gone through, we've actually formed groups in some of our areas, such as Delta, Syria, Bolset, and AJJK. We've really been able to get out there and verify them. In other cases, we're still waiting to do that, so we're relying on the livelihood group formation or the livelihood group update that was done in early fiscal year 20, late fiscal year 2019. So based on that, we've kind of gone through and made some changes. So these are kind of the changes you can see here. Yeah. Make this a little bit smaller so you can see that all in one place here. That may be too small. So either way, let's kind of go on over here. There we are. So what do we know? Well, there's a couple things. First of all, we've updated several of our sections. So like livelihood group members. So some of these are really quite good. We have actually reached more than we initially anticipated. So we initially thought, well, we're going to actually reach out to around 24,500. Yeah. And in actual fact, we've reached out now to 27,899, which is great. It also means that we need to make sure that those households receive services. Then we also have, number of LG members. Again, we've made a pretty significant increase. We need to make sure they still receive services. And then we have the number of livelihood groups, which again, we've slightly exceeded what we had anticipated. So that's all kind of great news. One of the other things that we did do was change the exchange rate. If you remember previous versions, this was at around 22. Right now, this is actually at we changed this to 34. I always know exchange rates are debated, but we're choosing 34 because it was the same rate that JUP and DIFs have used in their proposals they recently submitted. So you're also going to notice a couple other things with this table. One is we have what we had before. So as I remarked, we've made some, let me come down here. Because of the exchange rate difference or other ones, anytime we've made a change, what we did is we kind of locked this one, delinked it, did a value only paste, and gave us what we originally said. And then we can show where we made a change and what is the variance here. So that's the general purpose of that there. Okay. Now, one of the key concepts that we're going to look at this year is graduation. So as we all know, graduation is not within the purview of our resources, but it is within the purview of the governments. So what we do have control on is the services we offer. So we want to say that if a household has completed some of these key components, we can say they are now graduation ready. So that's really going to be key. It's using the term graduation ready. This means, have we done our due diligence? Have we done what we're responsible to do, which is to complete these activities so people would be able to graduate? So looking at that and assuming that people have had to complete the checklist before the government would consider them for graduation, we have some of the numbers here. So I'm going to actually hide this for a second. We're going to come back to that in a minute here. Let's see if we make sure. One is completed financial literacy. So we already have that activity. We have a measurement of how we have units on how we've been actually going to measure against it. So what do we have here? We have, well, let's go into a nice little split screen here. Let's do that again. So let's split that. And we can see this section down here. Well, one of the first things we need to do is complete the financial literacy training. So you can see that's what we have down here. We have participating in trainings, savings, either externally or internally. Right now, we only track internal, so what they save with their groups. What technical trainings they've received, that's actually is listed here on the list, but I've yet to I have to need to break that out a little bit further. Business training, have they received any business training? Have they developed a business plan, or what we also call a household resource plan? Now, the next one is, have they been referred for a financing? This one I'm not overly concerned about. That's the fact is that they cannot, we do not track that information on a regular basis. But what we can decide is what financing they received. We'll talk about that in a second. And then there's this other section is how they receive follow-up. And that's a little bit more difficult for us to kind of follow up with and record, because we really haven't recorded like number of visits that people get. But what we can say is that we have a constant field presence. Now, in terms of access to finance, we're going to really define that more broadly. Now, initially, we would have only defined this as really loans from LRO supported by FSPs. Yeah, these are ones supported by the loan guarantee funds. Loans from non-LRO supported FSPs. That one we've added, we began tracking livelihood transfers. That's okay. Now looking at youth enterprise grants. Those are ones we may be looking at. And then we also have done this COVID-19. So what does that mean here? Well, this indicates what we need to complete as our kind of new targets. And specifically, we really need to make sure we look at this number. So at minimum, we need to make sure that these people have, well, we should have given services to almost everyone. But if we want to say graduation ready, not all of them are going to have access to finance, but we hope to get most of them access to finance. And that's a number which we've had for a while, which is 18,375. That was the number we were supposed to graduate, but at least we can say we have them graduate ready, whether the government takes action or not. So what we do want to know is, well, if we were to assume that only a person could only receive one of these, they could only receive, one loan. One household could only receive a loan. We would have at least ones. The PSM transfer, you shouldn't be getting a loan livelihood transfer if you have been eligible for, if you're ultra poor, would not be eligible for a loan. And again, this is something we may be introducing based on resources. So in that case there, what we can say is that 20,000 households have received support. And what we need to do is get to around 18. And we're going to play with some of these numbers later on, but these are some general numbers. That's a big thing to notice, that we're going to do 18,375. And like I said, we may play around with that. So that's what we mean by graduation readiness. Now, for access to finance, we are looking at other ways. And we're not going to go into detail in this presentation, but we're looking at how we can provide incentives to financial service providers so they can reach out to more Cabela's and to more vulnerable populations. So we're looking at having them support them in the current kind of endeavors they do. We'd give them a higher rate of loan guarantee fund if they moved into Cabela's in which there's fewer people being served, or we may even give them a very strong incentive to serve populations which they have shied away, such as quite specifically the disabled, which very few people receive loans from that group. Yeah, so we're looking at all those right now. And lastly, let's talk about the DIP. For the DIP here, this is, again, everything's kind of connected now, so you can now see how things have kind of changed here. Yeah, so how the groups have kind of changed over time. I always have to take a look and make sure how those numbers. I want you just to kind of go back and see how that kind of all fits together. That'd be really kind of helpful as we do that. So I will be sharing this out after we've had a chance to talk about it. But I wanted to give you this presentation first so you can listen to it, and then I'll arrange for a meeting for us to talk later on today. Thank you very much.